Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Coffee, where in today's episode, we're going to be taking a deeper look, at Leia's Jedi training, specifically her reflecting on it while training Rey. That's today here on Star Wars Coffee.
I have spoken.
Hello there to all of the returning subscribers, but if you're new to the channel and you're just finding Star Wars Coffee for the first time, be sure to always hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. And don't forget to check out Star Wars Coffee on Twitter and Twitch, and don't forget to check out the official Star Wars Coffee merchandise. Links are in the description below.
Do it.
And now let's go to a galaxy far, far away.
This is the way.
So in The Rise of Skywalker, we got that scene, that very brief 30-second flashback of Leia's Jedi training. And I have a behind the scenes video on that, and what was really cool about that scene is that they had Billie Lourd playing Leia. So Carrie Fisher's daughter playing Leia was something really cool to see, and I encourage you all to go check that out. But with that being said, Leia did complete her Jedi training, and we know that she gave it up because she was going to have Ben Solo. And while Leia was training Rey in The Rise of Skywalker, while Rey was running the obstacle course, Leia was reminiscing about her Jedi training with Luke, and I thought we would take a look at that today. This comes from the Rise of Skywalker novelization written by Ray Carson. It is a really good book. The extra dialogue between characters and the thoughts between the characters are actually really good at giving context to the scene that we saw in the film. So while you're watching it, you're just going to be able to understand it a lot better, in the sense that you're going to be looking at Leia watching Rey run the course, and you're going to be able to know what Leia is thinking. And that's something that I think is really cool. And so we're going to take a look at this excerpt that goes over what Leia is thinking as she's training Rey. Rey sat cross-legged, eyes closed. She didn't remember rising off the ground, but she was vaguely aware that somehow she'd ended up floating. Pebbles and small boulders hovered around her, like a field of asteroids orbiting their sun. The Force flowed through her, buoyed her, connected her to everything. The lush rainforest moon of Asian Kloss was teeming with life. She could feel the very tree and fern, every reptile and insect. A few strides away, in a hidden den, a small furry creature groomed its litter of 4 kits. "That's it, Rey," came Leia's voice, deep and soothing as always. "Very good. Your connection becomes stronger every day. Can you feel it?" "Yes." "Now reach out. If your mind is ready, you'll be able to hear those who've come before you." Rey inhaled through her nose and sent her awareness into the void. Peace and calm were the key. Leia always said. She reached, she searched, she felt the breeze on her cheeks. She smelled loamy soil, damp from the recent rain. Rey. She didn't want to admit that she was failing, so instead she said, "Why did you stop training Luke?" Her words came out too harsh, almost like a challenge. Leia took it in stride. "Another life called to me." Eyes still closed, Rey asked, "How did you know?" "A feeling. Visions. Of serving the galaxy in different ways." "But how did you know those visions were true?" Rey pressed. "I knew." She heard the smile in Leia's voice. Rey didn't understand how Leia could be so sure of anything. "I treasured each moment I spent with my brother. The things he taught me. I use them every day. Once you touch the Force, it's part of you always. Over the years, I continued to learn and to grow. There were times on the Senate floor when the meditations I'd practiced with Luke were the only thing that kept me from causing a galactic incident." Rey frowned. Leia didn't need patience. She could have made anyone do anything she wanted, with the power of the Force. Surely she'd been tempted. "Was Luke angry when you quit?" She hoped Leia noticed that she could talk and float at the same time now. That was progress, right? Leia paused to consider. "He was disappointed, but he understood. I think he held out hope that I'd return to it someday." Rey almost laughed. He should have known better. Once Leia made a decision, it was for keeps. "I gave him my lightsaber to convince him otherwise. Told him to pass it along to a promising student someday." But Leia's voice had grown tight. Rey sensed she was holding something back. "Where's your lightsaber now?" "No idea. Now stop trying to distract me," Leia said. Leia watched Rey sprint away, a hint of smile on her lips. Training the girl away filled her with pride, but also misgiving. Rey was a wonderful and exasperating student, frustrated with anything she didn't pick up quickly, completely unaware of how fast she did pick things up. She wasn't one to judge. Leia had exasperated Luke just as much. Besides, there was something about growing old that made her connection with the Force even stronger. When the body began to fail, the mind reached out, unencumbered by physical activity. The truth was, Leia couldn't run through the jungle if she wanted to. Peace and calm came easily because her body craved them. Then again, perhaps Leia never had been young. By the time she'd reached the age Rey was now, she was leading a rebellion. Rey could be a great leader someday, and she would be, if Leia had anything to do with it. The girl had darkness inside her just like Ben, but Leia would not make the mistake she had with her son. She would not give in to fear, neither of the darkness rising within her pupil nor her own questionable qualifications as a teacher. More importantly, she would never send Rey away. Leia turned and began walking toward the base. She reached out at her fingers, trailed through the ferns, broad-leaved creepers that lined her path. Asian Kloss had so many good memories. Years ago, she'd trained here with Luke, who had declared it nice Dagobah. He'd claimed it was wet, warm, green, and overflowing with life as the planet where he'd trained with Yoda, except it didn't smell bad. She stepped into a clearing. To her right, a large tree with a massive trunk reached for sunlight, spreading a canopy of branches that shaded the clearing, keeping anything else from growing except around creeping ferns and low, sparse grass. Leia had trained right here, in this very spot. She reached out and touched the tree trunk reverently. A large bowl of bark had formed around an old wound. It was almost sealed shut. Leia had been the one to damage the tree. She'd swung for Luke with her lightsaber and missed, slashing the tree trunk instead. The tree trunk had been healing itself for more than 2 decades. "Oh, Luke, I hope I'm doing this right," she thought. Leia was no Jedi Master, but she had learned from the best. And not just from Luke. Over the years, she'd occasionally heard the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi through the Force, and even more rarely, that of Yoda. Some days it had felt as if she'd learned the Force itself. She was the first and foremost a politician and a general, but had accepted her Jedi legacy and embraced it the best she could. And maybe that's why Rey needed it. Training the Force was not from a formal master, but rather someone grounded in everyday minutiae of life and survival. Obi-Wan had failed to keep Vader from the dark side. Luke failed the same way. She could not fail Rey. Insects sang as she walked, birds warbled overhead, and tiny amphibians thrilled their mating calls. Odd how such a raucous place could be so peaceful. The noise was so loud, so ever-present, yet so soothing. It was almost as perfect silence. Many years ago, not long after the Battle of Endor, she discovered the meditative power of sound. She and Luke had stolen away for some training, and somehow she'd ended up standing on her hands, while Luke slung good-natured taunts her way. Even with her help from the Force, her shoulders had started to burn, her arms wobbled. They had already spent the last hour sparring with their lightsabers, and her body was exhausted. "You know," Luke had said, his voice smug, "when I did this on Dagobah, Yoda was sitting on my feet." He said that a lot back then. When I did this on Dagobah. It was obnoxious and completely unhelpful. So Leia reminded him, "You're being obnoxious and completely unhelpful. I also did it one-handed." He was trying to provoke her, to teach her a lesson about anger and impatience and all that nonsense. Luke had forgotten that his student was a superb strategist who'd already benefited from a royal education. Leia would not be provoked. Instead, she considered, she reached out to the Force, let it flow through her, like blood in her veins. A tiny insect began rubbing its mandibles together, whistling a sweet high song. Some instinct guided her, and Leia focused on the sound. It was beautiful, pure, completely untethered to the worries of leadership in teaching, failure, and learning. With focus, with the delight, Leia raised herself off the ground. She floated upside down. After a moment, she lifted her arms, then parallel to the ground. But she was just a student, new to the ways of the Force. She came back to herself, fully realized what she'd done. She whipped her hands back down, lest she fell. She didn't just in time. Her form collapsed and she found herself kneeling in mud. No matter, she'd do better next time. Leia looked up to find Luke staring at her, mouth open. "Did you ever do that with Yoda?" she couldn't ask, resisting. He shook his head wordlessly. "I can do better," she insisted. "Float longer." Luke finally found his voice. "You're going to make me a better teacher," he said. Not the response she expected. "What do you mean?" He reached down, helped her up. "Your footwork is terrible," he said. "Don't get me wrong, your lightsaber craft is coming along, but you do other things, naturally. What I mean is, you're exceptional. Just different." Then he had smiled, with that wide farm boy grin that had stayed with him all the way up until the night of Ben's betrayal. Leia shook off the memory with effort. Memories were coming fast and vivid these days. She was glad for this one, though. It would be the key to her training Rey. Leia and Rey were different, the last remnants of a dead order, and together they would carve a new path. So there we have a good, very, very good look back at that scene where Rey's doing her Jedi training while running the obstacle course, while Leia's walking off screen while we watch Rey, and reminiscing about all of these times she was being trained by Luke, which I think is something that is really cool to see, and I wish this would have been included in the flashback. You know, an extra 5 minutes of the movie where we got to hear that dialogue, see that scene where Leia's training, doing all these things, Luke taunting her about Dagobah. I think that would have been something that a lot of us would really like to see, but I'm really glad it was included in the novelization, because it does give us better insight as to Luke as a teacher, which I think is something that a lot of fans, especially myself, would like to see. An animated series, a live action series, something like that, where we get to see Luke, you know, after Return of the Jedi while he's rebuilding the Jedi Order. Because I'm very interested to see Luke as a teacher, because we've gotten to see Yoda, Obi-Wan, all of them as teachers, and I'd really like to dive into Luke as a teacher much more. Let me know what you guys think about this passage in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for watching, may God bless you, and the Force be with you. If you enjoyed this episode, and frankly, even if you didn't, don't forget to subscribe.
Do it.
And if you want to help spread the word, please give this video a thumbs up and tell your friends to subscribe. Please check out the official Star Wars Coffee merchandise, and don't forget to check out all of the content playlists on this channel, including The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, and much more.